Secretary Clinton joins us now. Good morning, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, George.
Your supporters have been pretty fired up in the last couple of days as you've been taking it to Donald Trump, and you also stepped it up using words like demagogue and dictator. Have you concluded that the best way to beat Donald Trump is to be a bit more like him?
No, not at all. I laid out in my speech in San Diego the crux of my concerns and my case against him on foreign policy and national security. And a lot of what he says plays into what I consider to be a very divisive and dangerous view of the world. And I think it's important that we call it for what it is.
You've also said that he's temperamentally unfit to be president. And in that speech, you said you're going to leave it to the psychiatrist to explain his affection for tyrants. Are you suggesting that he's mentally unstable?
Well, no, I'm suggesting exactly what I said, that he's temperamentally unfit. He doesn't really have ideas. He makes bizarre rants and engages in personal feuds and outright lies. He does apparently seem to have very thin skin. And I think that those kind of attributes, that temperament, is ill-suited for someone to be our president and commander-in-chief. And he's already, as I recited in my San Diego speech, on record on so many issues that run counter to what Democrats, Republicans alike over many decades have thought was in America's interests, in accordance with our values, and that, to me, is cause for concern.
What's the biggest danger coming from his temperament?
I think he engages in so much scapegoating and finger pointing, and he is someone who doesn't tell the truth. He doesn't seem to be bothered by the constant inherent contradictions. I said he had said that he would not mind having other countries have nuclear weapons, including Korea, Japan, Saudi Arabia. He said he didn't. A lot of news outlets, of course, easily pulled up the video of him saying all of that. His unpredictability, his putting everything in highly personal terms has rattled, and that's the word President Obama used, has rattled our closest allies, has caused a lot of serious concern around the world because people are not used to seeing anyone, a Republican or a Democrat, running for president who is so loose with the truth, so divisive, and so dismissive of very legitimate concerns about safety, security, our values, and who we are as a nation.
As you know, he said several times over the last few days that he thinks you should be going to jail over the email issues. And on Face the Nation, he's just given an interview to John Dickerson where he said he would look at this when he becomes president. Listen.
I would have my attorney general look at it because everyone knows that she's guilty. Now, I would say this, she's guilty, but I would let my attorney general make that determination. Maybe they would disagree.
Your response?
Well, it's a typical Trumpism, and I don't have any response. You know, when he attacks me, I am not going to respond. But I think it is in keeping with his very vicious public attack against the judge, the federal judge who is hearing the case against so-called Trump University, a judge who has an impeccable record as a prosecutor, who actually spent, as I'm told, nearly a year in hiding because of threats from criminal drug cartels against his life, who was appointed first by the Republican governor of California, Governor Schwarzenegger, then appointed by a Democratic president, President Obama, because of his extraordinary legal record. And what Trump is doing is trying to divert attention from the very serious fraud charges against Trump University that have basically been confirmed by some of the highest officials who worked with him. So this is typical. He does have that thin skin. And, you know, Judge Curiel is as American as I am, and certainly as American as Donald Trump is. And Trump's continuing ethnic slurs and rants against everyone, including a distinguished federal judge, I think makes my point rather conclusively.
But, Madam Secretary, on the email issue, as you know, the State Department Inspector General report was quite tough on your practices, and it concluded, I want to show it right here, that Secretary Clinton had an obligation to discuss using her personal email account to conduct official business with their offices, and according to these officials, diplomatic security and the information resource management offices did not and would not approve your exclusive reliance on a personal email account to conduct department business because of the restrictions in the Foreign Affairs Manual and the security risks in doing so. Do you now accept their conclusion that your exclusive use of a personal account was not allowed, that you broke State Department rules?
You know, look, George, I thought that the report actually made it clear that the practice I used was used by other secretaries, other high-ranking State Department officials.
No one else had
it was a mistake.
use of
If I had to do it, if I had to do it over again, I certainly wouldn't. But I think that the rules were not clarified until after I had left. Because it had been the practice of others. There was certainly reason to believe, which I did, that what I practiced was in keeping with others' practices.
But you were the only one who had exclusive use of a personal account. Secretary Powell did have a personal email account as well, and they were very, very clear. Go ahead.
Well, George, I have to tell you that I will say it was a mistake. I would not do it again, but I think that the rules were not clarified until after I had left, and the first Secretary of State to use a government email account was John Kerry some months into his tenure. Those are the facts.
But the report, so you don't accept the conclusions of the report because they say you were unmindful of the rules.
Everybody in the department knew that I was emailing from a personal address. Hundreds of people knew it. People around the government knew it. And, you know, that was what the practice had been, and that's what I did as well.
So I'll take it that you don't accept their conclusion. Just one other question on this. Have you had any contact yet with the FBI, you or your agents, over this matter?
I have not been asked to come in for an interview. I've said I am more than willing since last August, and I would like to do that sooner instead of later and get this matter wrapped up and behind us.
Let's talk about the Second Amendment. As you know, Donald Trump has also been out on the stump talking about the Second Amendment, saying you want to abolish the Second Amendment. I know you reject that, but I want to ask you a specific question. Do you believe that an individual's right to bear arms is a constitutional right, that it's not linked to service in a militia?
I think that for most of our history, there was a nuanced reading of the Second Amendment until the decision by the late Justice Scalia. And there was no argument until then that localities and states and the federal government had a right, as we do with every amendment, to impose reasonable regulations. So I believe we can have common sense gun safety measures consistent with the Second Amendment. And in fact, what I have proposed is supported by 90% of the American people and more than 75% of responsible gun owners. So that is exactly what I think is constitutionally permissible. And once again, you have Donald Trump just making outright fabrications, accusing me of something that is absolutely untrue. But I'm going to continue to speak out for comprehensive background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the online loophole, closing the so-called Charleston loophole, reversing the bill that Senator Sanders voted for and I voted against, giving immunity from liability to gun makers and sellers. I think all of that can and should be done, and it is, in my view, consistent with the Constitution.
And the Heller decision also does say there can be some restrictions, but that's not what I asked. I said, do you believe that their conclusion that an individual's right to bear arms is a constitutional right?
If it is a constitutional right, then it, like every other constitutional right, is subject to reasonable regulations. And what people have done with that decision is to take it as far as they possibly can and reject what has been our history from the very beginning of the Republic, where some of the earliest laws that were passed were about firearms. So I think it's important to recognize that reasonable people can say, as I do, responsible gun owners have a right. I have no objection to that. But the rest of the American public has a right to require certain kinds of regulatory responsible actions to protect everyone else.
How far would you go on that? Back in 1993, I don't want to show it right here, you actually came out in support of a gun tax. Let's listen.
How do you react to a 25% sales tax on handguns and on automatic weapons?
I'm all for that. I just don't know what else we're going to do to try to figure out how to get some handle on this violence. We will look at your proposal and be happy to talk with you about it. I'm speaking personally, but I feel very strongly about that.
Still believe that?
What I was saying back then was that we have a lot of public health costs that taxpayers end up paying for through Medicaid, Medicare, through uncompensated care, because that was in the context of the push for health care reform. And that we needed some way to try to defray those costs. And I'm not going to commit to any specific proposal. I was speaking personally then. I would have to, consider any proposal in light of how it interacted with all the others that we want to continue to advocate for, particularly, as I said, comprehensive background checks. But that was in the context of health care. When you have mass shootings, you not only have the terrible deaths, you have people who are injured. I was just in San Bernardino yesterday, and I met some of the survivors. One woman who was shot twice, who's had a series of surgeries. Two other women who are cowering in abject terror by the terrorists' unbelievable assault on their co-workers. What they talk to me about is, where do they get the financial support to deal with both the physical and the emotional trauma? Is it workman's comp support, which is one of the arguments? Is it private insurance? Is it because they work for the county, something the county should pay for? There are real costs that people incur because of the terrible gun violence epidemic. And we have to deal with it. And I'm going to be looking for ways to deal with it. I'm not committed to anything other than what I've said in this campaign. But I do want people to ask themselves, can't we do better than have 33,000 people killed every year by guns and many thousands more injured? And I think we can.
Finally, Madam Secretary, several more states voting on Tuesday, including California, where you are right now. Is this race against Bernie Sanders over, whether or not you win California on Tuesday?
Well, I think if you look at the popular vote, if you look at the majority of pledged delegates, I should have captured those by Tuesday. But I'm going to keep fighting hard here in California and in the other states that are voting on Tuesday because I want to get as strong a vote as I possibly can. But I think, given where we are in this race, that I will have not only more than a 3 million vote margin, but I will have a significant majority of pledged delegates by the close of voting on Tuesday.
Madam Secretary, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.